Periscope. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Oh, I see some hearts, so somebody can hear me. And I can see you there. I think I can see you, so make a comment if you can. So let's start out with Tom Fishburne, because I always like to start the day when he gets it in time, which is great. Should we schedule our next Zoom meeting or just hit ourselves repeatedly in the head with a hammer? And sadly, there's a lot of truth in that. And I always like Tom's commentary, see what's going on. Tom goes on to say, Tammy Sun, founder and CEO of Carrot, shared recently, Zoom fatigue has me wanting a landline and a rotary phone. And for those of you who don't know what a rotary phone is, that's how phones worked. And I watched a fascinating video about a guy who accidentally got invited to a meeting at, I think it was at GE, and or it was at Bell or something, you know, one of the AT&T, one of the big companies. And the boss came in and said, our network has been destroyed. It's been totally destroyed nationwide, and we have to rebuild it as fast as we can. And everybody looked at him in shock. And he said, well, it isn't exactly destroyed, but what we need to do is we need to, starting today, start thinking about how we would remake telephones if we could start over. If there were no telephones, what would we do differently? And to do that, we need that kind of urgency. So this guy, who had kind of no business in the room, but everybody in the room was like VP and above at AT&T. But this guy's a clever guy, and he just started like that week. And he was supposed to be in a meeting, another meeting, in somewhere else in New Jersey. And he found out, and so they put him on a team. And apparently he did some really good work. And they had to have recommendations done in, you know, a day or a half a day or something. And they had to work with other teams about other stuff and see if it was feasible. And it was fascinating. And from that meeting came the touch-tone phone, which is what most of you probably first remember, although I actually had not only a rotary phone, but a party line. So it rang a certain way for our house, and it rang a different way for a neighbor's house. And if you picked it up, you know, somebody might be talking on it, and that would be a neighbor, and that's all we had. And long distance was incredibly expensive. To call from Milwaukee to Madison, you know, it was like 50 cents a minute or something. And so we didn't do it much. And my relatives would call our house, because we had a Milwaukee plan that went all the way out into the Lake District, and we would relay messages to their relatives or our other relatives that lived out in Delafield, which was just a few miles away. Because it was so expensive to call from Milwaukee proper out to a suburban location now, you know, maybe 20 minutes from downtown, believe it or not. So things have changed. And from that meeting came touch-tone phones. From that meeting came voice recording and a host of other things. I think actually the smartphone was actually kind of conceived in that meeting. And I've been following a story about the Civil War and the destruction of the Southern railroads, but they were very many different gauges across America. And from that, Abraham Lincoln issued a gauge, a width of the rails, standardization, and a width of the cars. And because of that, we were able to quickly build across the country. From the destruction of the Civil War, we were able to build the Transcontinental Railway and really connect up the cities of America on other things besides just river traffic, which expanded the West unbelievably. So all of these things matter, even if you don't have a rotary phone or know what it is. But the challenge now with this broken technology, and we used to see this on the Jetsons, where people would talk on the wall to each other with a picture phone. back in the 60s, I think, 70s, 60s, and 70s, and now it's here. But your brain picks up on subliminal signals differently than it does on video, than it does on audio, or that it does in person. And there's a greater fatigue in trying to process conversations this way. And especially when they're in this kind of multi-person environment. It's really hard to tell what's exactly going on. I have trouble in the real world with real people. I have a lot more trouble on this. Okay. The only reason I like it is because it shows whether I'm paying attention, because it's so easy in a normal phone call to be checking email and doing other things that you shouldn't be and missing stuff, and it's terrible. But anyway, so Tom goes on to say, by mid-May, Zoom had a larger market capitalization than the 7 largest airlines combined. I think that'll change. I personally tell people I don't use Zoom because it's substantially a Chinese company, and they are allegedly spying on people, but that's not the issue here. So Google came out with Meet.Google, and I use that, and I use Microsoft's Meeting because not many consumers use it. They're all basically on Zoom or Facebook or something like that, FaceTime. But video conferencing changes how we process information. It increases the cognitive load. Humans are designed, I would say, I don't believe that, but anyway, this other stuff, but humans are designed because we can process those signals in a way that's meaningful, interpersonal signals. And not every communication requires a meeting, and not every meeting requires Zoom. So break your meetings, destroy them, and rethink them. Meeting on whether to call a meeting, meeting to plan the meeting, meeting to get stakeholder buy-in before the meeting meeting after the meeting, meeting after the meeting, meeting after the meeting, meeting to plan the next meeting. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Tom. Anyway, I'm going to go. I was going to talk about the augmented reality revolution. I may push that off to tomorrow. But I noticed this out of Australia. The skills gap and restrictive budgets are inhibiting transformation investments. But I really want to get over to Stephen Yu, who's a friend, who's talking about the basics of database solutions and database design. And it's an excellent article, as always, with Stephen. But they're a little longer. Can't help it. That's the way it is. So he says, beware of technology providers who insist on one-size-fits-all customer data solutions, and unless the price of entry is extremely low. And the goal of any data project is to create monetary value out of available data. I would say that is way more of should be way more of a priority than mostly it is. There's been this philosophy in marketing data since the late 80s that if you build it, you will make money. That for some reason they think the person with all the data is likely to have the most power. But think about your high school librarian. Was she the smartest, he or she, the smartest person in the room? Not necessarily, even though they had all the data. Or AT&T going under, basically, or getting split up or doing all that, when they had all the phone directories of the world. Of the United States. Blockbuster. Blockbuster came to me and said, "Can you build us a catalog that's going to work?" I said, "No, I can't. I don't see that making money." They went and did it. I recommended some people who would help them, regardless of the chance of success. They lost $5 million, but they said to me, we have the video behavior of 27 million households. I said, that doesn't matter. The numbers don't work. And they didn't. I said, and I'm not, I'm just saying you have to change one of these numbers. If you can't change the numbers, then it doesn't matter how much data you have. And so few people realize that. It has to do with your offer, your margin, your market, the likelihood of people buying. All those things come into play. I could probably have done more had I known what I know now, but it isn't all about having the most data. Start with the basics, good point. Things like, what's a good email? And we have software to test that, and it's helpful. Even basic hygiene basic hygiene, there is nothing basic about basic hygiene. Right now, we're working on a project where we've got an entirely new data set with entirely new match logic. We've been handling the match logic. It's extremely difficult to figure out who has bought twice in any data, because the consumers themselves will type their addresses differently. So we'll get address standardization. That's nice, but address standardization can remove details that actually indicate that there are two different people at two slightly different addresses. And so it simplifies it, makes the matching spectacularly easy. And so you tend to get multi-buyers who aren't really multi, and you tend to eliminate customers that you shouldn't be eliminating. It's extraordinarily complex. It's not complex if you just want to clean up a mailing list and put it in the mail. And if I were you, I'd mail the multis later. I'd mail the ones that matched and look like doubles. I'd mail them later just to be safe, in which case there's no downside to how you match exactly. It's just as long as you're half careful. You'll prevent someone getting 17 catalogs in their mailbox. And that's the roots of it. But once you push beyond that and you try to establish customer journey and customer repeat purchases, it's extraordinarily difficult. And I'll just go over this. The transactions. If I had a nickel for every 32nd of August transaction. And all of his issues are right to think about. But what you really need is someone who's used to making money in the world where no data is perfect and most is crucially imperfect. Who bought what, when, for how much, through what channel? Those are extraordinarily interesting questions. And every client has a different map to follow. So we built a structure that's capable of adapting to any client's map. And just now, after 18 months with a major client, one of the longer running catalogs, I think the longest running catalog in America, we're starting to get into some nuances of transactions that can make them an enormous amount of money. We've been asking them, no offense to them, they've tried, but there's a steep learning curve in what makes you money. And you have to understand the basics of modeling analytics. You have to look at the performance. You have to believe that it's even working, which takes months just to run the tests. Our last head-to-head uniques test with another modeling methodology were done in September, October, and we got the final results in March or late March, April. We have, so it takes a while. And then you make changes. Then you make new observations. You have more hypotheses. There's a lot of money that can be made in the first 6 months. There's a lot of money that can be made in the first year. And after that, you start getting into these questions. But you have to know how to handle them beforehand. Stephen talks about the variations. And I wasn't sure how no one should count canceled and returned transactions as a valid transaction for any analytics. Well, we do. Because there's certain zip codes that have high return rates, especially if you're in an apparel business. So if a customer buys and returns all or some of it, they end up with 0 sales in our system, and they're assessed a processing fee, 2 processing fees. So they end up with negative life-to-date margin. How about that? And so we can spot the chronic returners in a way that most systems can't. But that doesn't really matter. We have a client that never takes returns. They have a low price point, and they just send more. Now, we also are tracking that. What kind of customers get more? And it's really interesting the level that, for example, comes through digital and requests more versus comes through the traditional methodology and requests more. Very different return and resend profile. But all that can be found out with very simple data structures. It's just the way you handle all of that. And then he mentions men's, women's, children's, women's apparel broken down. We've seen, hundreds of customer product structures, SKU structures. And he says 3 to 5 levels of subcategories may be necessary for simple business intelligence reports. That may be true, but if you want to see what's happening in a way that makes you money, if you want to focus on variations in your customers, you better keep those simple to begin with. We tell people no more than 10 because, frankly, even with 10, most customers bought within one category. So the number of customers that have bought within, say, children's wear are probably less than 10% of your account total. So you've got 10% children. Some bought a little, some bought a lot. So you've got a lot of different variables you create around that. But 90% haven't. So they're just a zero. They're missing. And so those categories are only powerful if there's really a lot of people. So if you were contacting 500,000 people, only 50,000 would be in that bucket. And in 50,000, there's only about 10 breaks you can make, 5,000 into 5,000, groups of 5,000 that are meaningful. And we already know the RFM are going to be the most meaningful. So after that, you've already broken it into 50 cells, probably. Or 10 meaningful cells. You got nothing left to look at. And that's the truth of it. So what you really need is somebody that's going to throw your data in the box as efficiently as possible, deal with the mistakes, deal with the exceptions and the omissions, and there'll be plenty of them, and then figure out a way to make money with it as fast as possible. And that's what we do. And Stephen and I are on the same page. We're not arguing. I'm not arguing with him. But if you want to make money, as he says, the approach is to find somebody who knows how to make money with data, rather than the data scientist, the business information, the report builder, who will say, oh, over here if you look at this, or over here you look at that, or if you're here you look at that. Start with somebody who can make you money. Guaranteed ROI, 90 days. From the day we get your data to 90 days, we'll be making contacts and we'll set it up so we have a solid ROI. And in the last 3, we averaged 160% over their gross margin per piece. So that's what you want. I'm John Miglosh. Have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will think you're smart. Bye-bye.